So I think it's particularly interesting that the first set of speakers that were largely asked to talk about the future of teaching actually were more talking about students. And the first speaker that was supposed to be talking about the future of students was largely talking about teaching. And I think that, especially in the context of higher education, which is what I'm focused on, is a highly telling perspective. And one of the things that is going to cause a sea change in the way that students' lives will change in the context of higher education. So I think there are a number of factors that we have to think through. The first is that students will demand, because of data, because of experiences in high school, because of the dissemination of information about how things are done better in other institutions, they will demand a return to what was actually the original university. When Bologna was set up, it was set up by students for their education. Over time, that deteriorated, the faculty took over, and the faculty model dominated the next 900 years of higher education. That will change. Students will be empowered to actually shift the balance of power and demand a student experience that caters to what it is that they need in their lives. This concept that they will be taught by people who come to teaching by accident because they're being paid to do something else and then they happen to be instructing students on the side is not going to be tolerated anymore. The balance between research and teaching will come back. A balance that has been largely absent over the last 60 or 70 years in university education. And so what will that translate into? So it'll translate into students that will be independent of place when it comes to instruction, which means that they can restructure the concept of place. And so if you think about university education today, it is largely, though with places like the Open University and others, it is starting to change in MOOCs, but it is largely around the concept of you congregate a number of experts in a physical location, and then you have students come around and be instructed by those individuals. Now, that can create one of two types of environments. One environment is what I generally refer to as the continental European environment. You drive to class and then you drive home and you eat at home and go to sleep in the bed that you grew up in. And one which is more of the Anglo-Saxon model, which is you get carted away to a bubble where you can be safely kept for 4 years out of the reaches of society and interact with professors in that regard. In my opinion, both of those models will continue to exist because there will be a variety of ideas, but they will be subordinate to a third model. And the third model will allow students to have a formal curricular experience, an experiential learning experience, and then an integrative experience that brings those two and allows the students to, while they study, create on their own across a large number of what are now not known as academic institutions. We have some examples of this in traditional universities. So for example, when George Rupp became the president of Columbia University in the early 1990s, he came to Columbia and almost all of Columbia's literature, all of their admissions literature, was about Columbia's campus. Oh, you come to Columbia and you have this great campus and you live on this campus. And George Rupp says, well, this makes absolutely no sense. Columbia is in New York, one of the world's great cities. Who cares about what's on campus? What matters is that you're in New York. And over the next decade, shifted Columbia's entire positioning to be about taking advantage of New York. Now, Columbia has the luxury of being in New York. Other institutions don't. But what is going to happen is that students will eventually be able to go to Stanford in New York. They're going to be able to go to Cambridge in New York. They're going to be able to go to Columbia in London. right? And the idea is that there's going to be a cutting of the experiential portion of your education and your formal education. And that will then get integrated across student experiences, what in American parlance is extracurricular activities, that students will then apply wherever they are. So Minerva, as an example, is a university that is set up with that model in mind. Even though 100% of our formal curriculum is delivered in small seminars, they're capped at 19 students. It is the highest touch American university that will exist. The students will live in 7 different world capitals over their 4 years of their undergraduate career. That ability to have a highly immersive, high-touch education, formal curriculum that picks up where Jose leaves off. It is in the subject matter, in those questions that require the close personal interaction of the students and professor, where the robot can't do a better job, will then be supplemented by a student experience that allows them to apply that learning actively through different perspectives in the way that different cities operate, in the way that important change makers in those cities, whether they be in the political sphere, in the business sphere, the cultural sphere, work and create, and then challenges the students to take those things and create that themselves. Our belief is that the student experience that Minerva will create will be a model that other universities will follow, whether they intend to or not, because if it is successful, it is something that the students will ultimately demand. So that's my view, and I hope to give a couple of minutes back to Q&A.